The Texas sun was already high when Caleb Ford saddled his horse and rode out toward the south pasture. The air shimmered like molten gold, and the dry wind carried the smell of dust and sage. For 10 long years, he had run the Ford ranch alone, ever since his wife, Mary, passed away bringing their youngest child into the world. He had buried her beneath a mesquite tree overlooking the hills, and from that day on, the laughter had left his house. Caleb was a man of few words, his face bronzed by sun and sorrow. He woke before dawn, worked until night, and spoke mostly to his horses or his 5 children, who had learned early that their father's silence was love in its own way. Life had become a rhythm, hard, predictable, and empty. But that was about to change. One scorching afternoon, as he fixed the north fence, a creaking stagecoach pulled up on the distant road. The horses were sweating, and the driver shouted for water. Caleb set his tools down and walked over. From the coach stepped a woman, her dress dusty from travel, her blonde hair tucked beneath a small hat. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, carrying the quiet ache of someone who'd known loss. "Ma'am," Caleb greeted, tipping his hat. "Stage stops a mile east. You lost." The woman gave a small nod, clutching a carpet bag close to her chest. "I'm looking for work," she said softly. "I was told there might be a school position nearby." Caleb scratched his chin. "Schoolhouse closed last winter. Ain't been a teacher since." Her expression fell, and for a moment she looked so fragile he felt something stir in him, a sense of protectiveness he hadn't felt in years. "You can rest at my ranch till you figure where you're headed," he offered. She hesitated, studying the tall, rugged man before her, then nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Ford," he said. "Caleb Ford." She smiled faintly. Eliza Moore." That evening, the ranch came alive in a way it hadn't for years. Caleb's children, curious and wide-eyed, surrounded the stranger. She helped the youngest girl tie her hair back and even hummed a soft tune while washing dishes. Her voice carried through the kitchen, and Caleb found himself listening from the doorway, arms crossed, heart unexpectedly light. As the sun set behind the rolling hills, painting the sky with crimson and gold, Eliza stood on the porch and looked toward the horizon. Caleb joined her, standing a respectful distance away. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He nodded. "Hard land, but it grows on you." Eliza smiled faintly, her eyes glistening in the fading light. "Maybe that's what I need. Something that grows on me." Caleb didn't answer, but deep inside, a seed of something long buried began to stir, something like hope. That night, as he blew out the lamp, he glanced once more toward the spare room where Eliza slept. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel so empty. The next morning dawned cool and quiet, the kind of rare Texas morning that made even the dust seem gentle. Eliza had already been up before Caleb, preparing biscuits and coffee for the children. The scent filled the small cabin, and for a moment, Caleb stood in the doorway, watching her move. There was something graceful in her every motion, like someone used to order and warmth, not this hard, lonely country. "Didn't have to do that," he said, his voice low but not unkind. Eliza smiled without turning. "Didn't seem right, sitting around while everyone worked. I'm used to earning my keep." Caleb nodded, taking a seat at the table. "You'll fit in fine then. This ranch don't slow down for anyone." Over breakfast, his children laughed more than usual. Even little Sarah, who hadn't spoken much since her mother died, asked Eliza questions about the big cities back east. Eliza answered patiently, weaving stories about train whistles, streetlights, and shops filled with dresses. Caleb listened quietly, pretending not to care, though inside, he felt something shift. As the week passed, Eliza settled into ranch life as though she had always belonged. She mended shirts, helped with the horses, even stood beside Caleb at the corral when one of the calves went missing. The other ranchers in town began to notice, whispering about the mysterious blonde staying with the widowed cowboy. One evening, after putting the children to bed, Caleb found her sitting alone by the fire. The glow painted her face in amber light, and her eyes looked lost in thought. "Something on your mind?" he asked, leaning on the doorframe. She hesitated, then looked up. "I should probably tell you the truth," she said softly. "You've been kind to me, more than anyone's been in a long time. But I wasn't looking for a school job." Caleb's jaw tightened slightly, though his gaze stayed steady. "Then what were you running from?" Eliza took a breath, her hands trembling slightly. "My husband. Or, the man who used to be. He was cruel, Mr. Ford. The kind of man who thinks a woman's worth is only what she can give him." I can't have children, you see. A doctor told me years ago. After that, he said I was useless. Caleb's face softened, the firelight catching the sorrow in his eyes. You don't owe anyone an apology for that. Her voice cracked. It's why I ran. I wanted to start somewhere new, somewhere people didn't look at me like I was broken. Caleb stepped closer, his boots quiet on the wood floor. You ain't broken, Eliza, he said, his voice rough but sincere. You're just hurt. There's a difference. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the only sound the gentle crackle of the fire. Then Eliza whispered, You're a good man, Caleb. He looked into her eyes, steady, kind, and tired of running. Maybe, he murmured, but even good men need a reason to hope again. Outside, the wind swept across the open plains, carrying with it the faint promise of change. Days turned into weeks, and by mid-autumn, the ranch had come alive in a way Caleb hadn't seen since his wife passed. Eliza's presence brought warmth to the cold rooms and laughter to the long dinners. The children adored her, especially Sarah, who followed her everywhere, mimicking the way she braided her hair or hummed while she worked. Caleb tried to ignore the growing pull he felt toward her, burying himself in chores, mending fences, or checking on the cattle before dawn. But every time he returned home, the sound of Eliza's voice made something inside him soften, something he thought was gone forever. One afternoon, dark clouds began to crawl over the horizon. The air turned heavy, and the sky split open with thunder. Get the kids inside, Caleb shouted as he tied down the feed barrels. Eliza herded the children into the house while he ran back into the rain to rescue a trapped calf near the stream. By the time he returned, he was drenched, mud covering his boots and arms. Eliza met him at the door with a towel, her eyes wide with worry. You'll catch your death out there, she scolded, taking his hat and setting it by the fire. He gave a tired smile. Wouldn't be the first time someone told me that. When the storm hit in full, the ranch shook. Rain hammered against the windows, lightning flashed through the sky, and thunder rolled like a drum. Inside, Caleb and Eliza worked side by side, keeping the children calm with stories and songs. As night deepened, the youngest fell asleep by the fire, one by one. Caleb sat near the hearth, rubbing his tired hands. Eliza brought him a cup of coffee, then sat beside him. For a long moment, they watched the fire in silence. You're good with them, he said quietly. My kids, I mean. They look at you like you hung the stars. She smiled faintly. Maybe because they see how much you care for them. You've done more alone than most families do together. He looked at her, eyes reflecting the firelight. Don't feel like enough sometimes. Eliza turned to face him. Caleb, what you've built here, the home, the love, that's more than most people ever find. He took a breath, his voice low. I wasn't sure I could ever feel again. Not after Mary. I know, she said softly. And I wasn't sure I could ever be wanted again, not after what I went through. A long silence hung between them, not uncomfortable, just real. The storm outside softened to a steady patter of rain. Caleb looked down, then back up at her. Eliza, he said gently, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Least of all to me. Her eyes glistened, and before she could stop herself, she reached for his hand. Maybe I already have, she whispered. The thunder rolled far away now, fading into the night, as if the worst of both their storms had finally passed. The morning after the storm was quiet and clean, the air washed free of dust. Sunlight spilled through the cabin windows, landing in soft golden stripes across the wooden floor. Caleb stepped outside with a steaming mug of coffee, breathing in the crisp scent of wet earth. The land looked new again, greener, calmer, as if the heavens themselves had offered a second chance. Inside, Eliza was tending to the children's breakfast. Her hair was slightly damp, tied back loosely, and when she turned and caught Caleb watching her, a shy smile touched her lips. Good morning, she said. He nodded. Feels like the world's been reset. She laughed softly. Maybe it has. For the next few days, everything settled into a peaceful rhythm. The ranch had survived the storm, the fences were strong, and for the first time in years, Caleb found himself humming while he worked. But one afternoon, as he returned from town, he found a lone rider at the gate, a man in a black coat with a familiar look of trouble. Looking for a woman, the stranger said, eyes cold and sharp. Name's Eliza Moore. Caleb's jaw tightened. You're a long way from wherever she came from. The man smirked. She's my wife. Ran off with my money and my horse. I just want what's mine. Caleb's fists clenched, but his voice stayed calm. Ain't nothing here that belongs to you. You should turn back. The man's eyes narrowed. You hiding her? Caleb didn't answer, he didn't have to. The look in his eyes said enough. The stranger's hand drifted toward his revolver, but before he could draw, Caleb took a single step forward, his presence like a wall of stone. She's safe here, Caleb said, voice low and steady. And you're leaving now. The man hesitated, then spat on the dirt. You'll regret this, cowboy. He turned his horse and rode off, disappearing down the trail. When Caleb came back to the porch, Eliza stood there, pale but steady. He was my husband, she said quietly. I thought I'd never see him again. You won't, Caleb said simply. Not while I'm breathing. Tears welled in her eyes. You don't owe me that. He stepped closer, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Maybe I don't, but I want to. That evening, as the sun set over the hills, the family gathered on the porch. The children laughed, chasing fireflies, their laughter carrying into the golden air. Eliza sat beside Caleb, their shoulders touching lightly. I used to think I was broken, she whispered. That I couldn't give anyone a real home. Caleb looked at her, his voice tender. You already have, Eliza. Maybe not the way you expected, but this ranch, it's more alive now than it's been in 10 years. You gave that to us. A soft smile touched her lips. And you gave me a reason to believe again. As the stars began to bloom across the Texas sky, Caleb took her hand and held it gently. For the first time in a long, lonely life, he wasn't just surviving. He was living, and this time, he wasn't alone.